Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 46. Now, before we get into today's episode, if you haven't checked out our brand new website, go and check it out, do us a flavor. It's www.camerashakepodcast.com, and you can join our little community there. It'd be super awesome if you would subscribe to our little newsletter. We would love it if you did that. Likewise, if you are listening to this episode on audio, like on Apple Podcast or Spotify or Amazon or something like that, you can, of course, head over to YouTube, where you not only be able to hear our beautiful voices, but you'll also be able to see our faces in full Technicolor. Now, that being said, please welcome our super special guest, Camera Shake episode 46. Today we have none other than Mr. Glyn Dewis on the show. How are you, Glyn?
I'm very well. How are you both?
Fantastic. Not bad. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Cool.
Good stuff.
So, Glyn, how's pandemic life in Devon treating you?
Do you know what? It's not too bad. I've kind of literally just come out of my own lockdown anyway, because I've just been writing the latest book. So I had to just absorb myself in that. So even if we weren't on a lockdown, I would have been. But I can think of worse places to be, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
When we're having restrictions, I really can. So, it's all right. It's all right is what I'll say.
There's one thing I was going to ask you, because under normal circumstances, in real life, if you want, you're a portrait photographer. Mm-hmm. So you're a portrait photographer, a best-selling author of a particular book that I want to talk to you about later. But you're also a Kelby One instructor and self-proclaimed animal lover, of course. How do you find being in lockdown in the middle of a global pandemic as a portrait photographer, when you can't get any close to people?
It's a very good question, and it's something I have talked about a little bit on some recent videos as well. It's, you kind of have to accept that you can't go out and take portraits. And whereas I've seen, without naming names, you see quite a few people saying, "Oh, I can't wait for the COVID to disappear so I can get out, start taking portraits again." I've just, my mindset is that you can't be like that, because our creativity is, going by the title of a recent video, creativity is like a muscle. If we don't exercise it, it's going to get weaker. So that when we do come out of this, everything's going to be so much harder. So my kind of attitude is, look, I know I can't get out and take portraits, especially of veterans, because it just would not be safe to do it. So just get out there and do something. Even if it's not your thing that you would ordinarily photograph, just get out there and do something. I mean, I'm doing this landscape stuff, and I am absolutely loving it. Do you know what I mean? It's been fantastic fun. It really has. And without it, I think I'd have gone a little bit stir crazy. So you've got to do something, regardless of what it is. Just keep the tools in your hands.
Well, there's a video of yours I watched not too long ago, which was entitled "I Suck at Landscape Photography."
Oh yeah. What a title!
Yeah, perfect. Well, it's just straight to the point. Because the funny thing about this is, I watched this and I thought, I'm really in exactly the same boat. I was gonna last August, I was going to go to Canada to see family in Nova Scotia. And also, at the same time, I was going to take that as an opportunity to, to level up my landscape photography game. Because I'm completely crap at landscape photography. And it's mainly because I never actually do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, watching your YouTube video made me think, well, yeah, that's really no reason why, I can't do this in my backyard.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, like, you say about being in Devon, we are very fortunate. I won't say lucky, because I've worked really hard to get to live here, but I'll say fortunate. And we've got a lot of stuff on our doorstep that we can go out locally. There's like 9 different woodlands near to us. And then we've got the coast not too far away. So, we are lucky when it comes to that. But even so, if I just go out into the little village here and just walk around, there are things that we can photograph. So it doesn't have to be the epic landscapes. It can be the little things,
You mentioned, Glyn, about it being a creative muscle. It couldn't be more true. I found myself getting quite down and feeling a bit crappy over the last year or so since all this began. And it got to a point towards the end of last year, this guys can't carry on. And I forced myself to go out and take a photo of something that caught my eye in my local town, my local village, every single day. And I made sure of it and I posted it. And that's what I did. And I'll tell you what, do you know how much happier I was during that month of doing it?
Yeah.
And I've kept that going ever since.
You've got the tools in your hands, Nick, haven't you? You're out there doing something and you are exercising it. And I'm convinced if we just do something, like me being a portrait photographer, by doing landscapes, that's definitely changed me. And I'm sure it's going to benefit my portrait photography when I get back to it. Same with you guys. If you get out and do something, no matter what it is, it's got to have a benefit when you get back to normality. It's got to.
Absolutely. And I think, you'll... any little thing that you learn doing landscape will translate. Something will translate across.
Definitely.
Even if it's your understanding of how aperture works in longer. I don't know, whatever it might be. And
just slowing down more than anything, mate. Just taking that time to slow down and enjoy where you are. That is. If I just going to digress just a little bit, I did a picture going back a few weeks now. And it wasn't what I'd planned. I'm in this woodland near me. I didn't get the picture I wanted to get. And I just stopped and had a coffee and just relaxed. And I thought about anything and everything except photography. And then I saw this tree with this lichen on it. And the light came through. And I thought, grab that shot. Posted it. And then I had somebody who's actually a member of the Kelby One community, because I did something for them. And he's posted in this comment section to say, you did a video called I Suck at Photography, like the one you mentioned, Kersten, then. And he says, but it's just made me think, you did that portrait of a tree because you did it the way that you take portraits of people. You slow down, you get to know them, you take time, and then it all comes together. I thought, my God, he's right. That's really quite wise. There's definitely an overlap between landscape and portrait if you kind of do it that way. So there's definitely benefits of doing something else, because there's going to be an overlap, like you say, Nick. There has to be.
What is it? That's an interesting thing, because we a little while ago, in fact, I guess it was like last summer or autumn, Nick and me decided that, seeing that we can't really shoot other people, we're going to do something different. We're going to shoot cars. That was sort of our idea. And so we went out and we had a guest on the show who specialized in light painting cars. And so we kind of thought that's a cool thing to do, because, cars, that's fine. We can photograph a car. And so, we did a few of those. And then I spoke to someone, and we were just discussing these shots that we're taking, and I kept saying, like, look, I like what we can do with the car. I just don't seem to be able to find the right backgrounds, like the right settings. Because that's, look, if you think about it as landscape photography with a car in it, then it makes you think completely differently about the final shot. That really sort of switched on a light bulb, and it's like, that makes perfect sense. Let's think about the location first, and then let's see how we can fit the car into that. And that's really, really worked. And I think, like, with that, our automotive shots improved radically, because they now, you put a different emphasis on the background, because before the focus was all on the car.
Whereas it's everything, isn't it? It's the whole thing. But you're not going to know all that straight away. And this is the great thing about the photography world, isn't it? There's always more to learn, more to consider. When you go back and do something a second time, you maybe do it a little bit different. I did a talk recently, and it was all to do with slowing down and the benefits of it. And I said, I tried to come up with this real clever mnemonic. I was trying to be wise. It didn't come easy. And it was the SIR principle. Slow down was number one. Immerse yourself in the environment and repeat. So if you could go back and photograph let's say if you're taking a portrait, if you could go back and photograph that same person again, would you do it the same way, or is there something you'd change? Because you get to know a little bit more about them and what suits them and whatever. Do you know what I mean? So that's what's really exciting about it all. There is always more to learn. I love it.
I think this pandemic and the whole lockdown and everything else, if you look at it the right way, it really has been an opportunity to change. And I know, like, humans are usually a lot of humans are kind of change adverse, but I've really learned in this pandemic that change can actually be a good thing, because I do think that having been forced to think differently, do different things, photograph things that I wouldn't have ordinarily photographed, it's actually overall made me a better photographer. So whilst otherwise, I think, I would have probably just carried on doing what I was doing before, and I would have done a hell of a lot more headshots for sure. And my bank account would thank me for it. But but as it is, I think I've definitely improved my skill set. And if anything is a takeaway from this whole situation, then that is.
And it's also it's okay. I mean, Nick, you mentioned there that last year they went through a phase when you started to feel really like, oh God, it's really strong. That's normal. We're all going to get through that. Anybody says that they don't experience that is lying. Do you know what I mean? I'm all for being positive mental attitude and stuff like that, but let's be also realistic. We're all going to go through the doldrums and the feeling a little bit, oh God, this is really hard. But just getting out and doing that one thing, just forcing yourself to get out and do something changes everything. I kind of equate it a little bit to when I used to do the bodybuilding. There was times I didn't want to go to the gym. I'd rather just lie in bed and not go to the gym that day. But you know what? Most of those times when I felt that way, when I did force myself to go to the gym, they ended up being the best workouts.
Yes.
It's the same with photography. I mean, if you think, oh no, I will go out. And you think, do you know what? I've really enjoyed this. I never knew I'd get that picture. So you can kind of relate the photography world to pretty much everything that you do in life, really, because if you don't treat it like, normally, then you're not going to get a result. If you kind of go with that mindset of just being relaxed and going out and enjoying the place, you'll get something. But if you go out thinking, I must get a picture, you're probably not going to get one.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. All of these type of things relate. And then it's not specific to photography, to working out, to playing music, whatever it might be. This is just the way humans think and the way our brains work. I mentioned last week on last week's episode that I've started running for the first time ever, and I've managed to stick to it every other day for like 2 weeks.
Good on you.
And there was a time, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. I just wasn't in the mood. I couldn't be bothered in the morning, but I forced myself to go. I went the furthest and fastest that I've been today, and felt fantastic when I got back.
Yeah.
Was it your mum's comment on that episode, on the video, that made you go out in the end?
Oh,
I think your mum commented on it.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, she convinces me to do lots of things. Yeah.
So, Glyn, before this whole pandemic thing started, you did a project which I thought was really very, very eye-catching and very thought-provoking, which was your veterans project, the World War II veterans project. How did that come about originally?
I guess almost by accident, and it certainly grew. It's grown, and it's still ongoing. Once this is all over, I will continue. Thankfully, we've got plenty of veterans to go and see. But it kind of came about because initially, I don't like photographing models. Let's just put it out there. I'm not somebody who likes to photograph models. I like to photograph, for want of a better phrase, real people, real characters. So I'd seen a film, Dad's Army, the remake they did of Dad's Army a few years ago, and I loved it. And I said to my mate, I'd love to photograph people like that. He then told me about a reenactment group. I got in touch with them. I ended up photographing them, thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was whilst I was doing that I kind of it just came to me that the ultimate thing I'd like to do would be to photograph surviving World War II veterans. And I've always had an interest in that part of history anyway. Very close to my Uncle Jeff, who's ex-military, and I just love to sit and talk to him about all sorts of stuff like that. So I thought that's what I want to do. It's my way of saying thank you, completely funded by me, to be able to present a veteran with a portrait that can stay in the family. And I didn't know any veterans, which was a bit of a stumbling block at the start. But I found a group on Facebook called the Normandy Veterans Family and Friends, and a private group. They allowed me to join because I said that, I've got an interest in it. My granddad was in Normandy. And then I did a post to say what ideally I would like to do. And when I think back to what I wrote, they must have thought, who is this weirdo? Do you know what I mean? Because I basically said, in a simple way, I basically said, can you introduce me to some really old people that I can go to see? And that's basically what it was, you know what I mean? Which is kind of weird, but thankfully, I didn't actually say it like that. But this one woman kind of just thought, I'll test him out. And she contacted me through that group and said, look, there's somebody I think I'd like you to meet and photograph. This is who it is. I'll be there as well. And it kind of went from there. And she really went there to test me out, to see, was I respectful, and all that kind of stuff. And the veterans world being the veterans world, if you do something good and you do what you say you're going to do, it spreads very fast. But equally, if you do something bad, it also spreads very fast. And it kind of just went from there. But I never intended the project to grow as big as it has, but I'm really glad it has, because it's kind of, it's been the best thing I've ever done, not just in photography life, but in my life. It's been the most fulfilling thing I have ever done. It's just been brilliant.
And I think that comes through in those portraits. You're an amazing portrait photographer, full stop. But these portraits in particular, they are, because there's a message behind it. Right. Because you can tell that you've put, it's something that's close to you, that's, that you just wanted. It's not just taking a portrait of someone. There's real meaning for you behind it. I think they come through in those pictures.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
If anybody hasn't yet seen Glyn's photos, just get out there and look at it. We'll have all the address and details in the description below.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. It's this project. I mean, my photography's changed since I did this project. I have been on a huge learning curve since I started it as well. Whereas before, I was kind of comfortable doing portraits, but when I started photographing these people who weren't models, who were maybe a little bit anxious about being photographed, but I had to get the best possible picture of them. And I'm not talking technically, I'm talking just them. I've learned more in the last, if we ignore 2020, more in the last 2 years of taking pictures than I have in my whole career as a photographer, about how to relax people. It's just been the best experience in so many ways. It really has.
There was one thing I learned from Gary Hughes a few years ago, where he said, like, the reason why he puts his camera on a tripod is because so he can actually move away from it and communicate with the person and talk to them without having this thing in front of their face. And because of that, I shoot portraits and headshots with a tripod. I have done for the last 3 years or 4 years or something. Because before that, I was more like, oh yeah, but if I handhold it, I've got more flexibility. I can move around. It's easier. And then I used to think like the tripod kind of ties you down and it doesn't give you as much like flexibility. But I completely had ignored this whole thing of building that relationship with your subject. And that was really an eye-opener. I found out that was,
I would never shoot a headshot without a tripod, ever. But I never, like you, Kirsten, I never did beforehand. When it came to the project, I was handheld because I felt tripods were a little bit cumbersome. They created a barrier. Far from it. Absolutely far from it. The camera's on the tripod. I mean, nowadays with technology, do we need to really get behind the camera? Really, we can see what's on the back. We know that certain cameras, we've got that thing where it'll lock onto their face, it'll lock onto the eyes. I know that that's going to be working. I can remain above the camera and keep that engagement, that contact going. And while I'm doing that, they're not self-conscious and aware that I'm taking a picture, really. So it's the tripod is a vital part of the kit. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because we tend to forget sometimes that the person that we're photographing isn't 99.9% of the time isn't used to being in front of the camera. And I always find this, especially with headshots, is that probably the first, 40, 50, 60 shots are usually not keepers. They're really just warm-up shots. And as we kind of get to the meat of it, the really good shots start to happen when the subject or the client starts to relax a little bit. And that's not necessarily always possible, of course. If you get a very short amount of time, like like when I shoot conferences, or do headshots at conferences, for example, it's like it's in and out, and you don't really have that time. When you have a client in the studio, and you have a little bit of time around that, then you can kind of go through this sort of warm up at the beginning, and it's when they start to relax. That's when the best shots start to come out.
You see, it's very different then if you think about how you're working there, because people are coming in, they're getting a portrait taken, they're sitting down. And then you're taking those, for want of a better phrase, throwaway shots because you're using those to give them time to relax. Whereas the way that I work is different. Maybe it's just my own workflow is that my portraits are always done on location for a start off. So it's in their homes. And I'll always leave the kit in the car. When I first turn up, that kit stays in the car, does not come to the door with me when I first knock on the door. So I'll spend half an hour, 40 minutes, even longer sometimes, chatting over a cup of tea. That's when we get them relaxed. And we're enjoying each other's company, having a bit of a laugh, having a bit of cake and whatever. And then I'll go, tell you what, I'm here to take your portrait. Let's go. I'll get the stuff from the car. Let's get that done and get it out the way.
Yeah.
So then setting up, I'm keeping talking. We do the portrait. And this is I'm sorry if I'm going too quick here, but the one key thing when I'm doing this is because I have people say, when you're taking a portrait, do you ever show the people as you're doing it? Absolutely, I do. But the thing is, we've worked so hard in a way to get them relaxed. And that sounds odd, doesn't it? We've spent time to get them relaxed. When I show them the portrait, which I do, if I was photographing you guys, I'd do exactly the same thing. Tethered to the laptop, I'd go, I'd go, take a shot. And I'd probably take, on a portrait shoot, 8-9 shots maximum. That's it. Because I've spent the time before talking and getting them relaxed.
Yeah.
When I show them the picture, I turn the laptop. And what the key thing is what I've learned to do. Whereas before, I would go, oh my God, Nick, you look amazing. Oh my God. Now, if you're self-conscious, Nick, you're going to go, I don't know. I hate having my picture taken. But what I do is I go, oh, Nick, I am so happy with the lighting in this. The lighting, I'm just over the moon with this. These are going to look great. I'm really happy how these are turning out. So you're not thinking, he's praising me and feeling uncomfortable about it. He's like, he's really happy with how he's setting it all up and it's all looking good for him. Brilliant. Do you know what I mean? It's a completely different approach. I'm so happy with the lighting on this. Makes a huge difference.
Yeah, because the thing for me is when I do headshot sessions, especially when I do when I have a little bit of time and I do a longer session, I take some warm-up shots and then I get the client to have a look at maybe 20, 30 shots on the screen. And what that's telling me is how they look at themselves. Because ultimately with a headshot, of course, I wouldn't be happy with it, but really, ultimately, it's about the client and whether they're happy with the end product. And everybody's got this thing about the way they look that, it's just personal to them. So maybe somebody, you might not, I don't know, like the shape of your nose. And so when your face is angled a certain way, you just don't like the way it looks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And me as a photographer, this is one thing I've learned through doing headshots for years is that the shots that I would pick as a photographer, I would think like, right out of these 100 shots, these are my keepers. These are like the, the 5-star images. They're guaranteed to be different shots from the one that the client would pick.
Yeah.
And so what that first session on the screen, like that minute or 2 minutes, where we look at the shots on the screen, what that tells me, I'm actually not watching the shots, I'm watching the client. And I'm looking at how they react. And that gives me an idea as to what they like and how I can then progress the session. So if I know, for instance, they don't like to be photographed from, I don't know, just for argument's sake, from the left side or something like that, I know I can kind of avoid that and move into the direction that I know will please the client.
That's actually really clever, that is, because that's kind of making their particular photo shoot quite bespoke to them, as opposed to you being almost robotic about the approach. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of thinking, right, okay, let's take a few, see their reaction. Right, I like the way they reacted to that. We'll do more of that. I'll bank that, and then exactly. that's I like that approach. That's good. Yeah.
So I mean, that's really working for me. And as an end result, I'd like to say I have lots of happy clients, but that's really that was a turning point for me, I think, because when I first started doing headshots, I could never understand why I'd look at a picture and I think, like, this is an awesome shot. How can I not like this? It's incredible. They look incredible. And it's go, oh no, I have a fat neck. It's like, you don't have a fat. What are you talking about? It's like, I don't even know what that means. But it's like, I had a client some time ago. It was actually just before the pandemic. She got back to me a few months after the session because, like, could you send me one of the shots with the fat neck in it? I just want to have that as a comparison to show people how good you are. To how you can make people look really good in front of the camera. And I'm like, fat neck. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what photograph that I took of you you don't have a fat neck?
Isn't it weird how we view ourselves? It's strange, isn't it? It really is.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
So anyway, coming back to your veterans shoot. Mm-hmm. So is that something you're planning on continuing once
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's like I say, it's been the best thing I've ever done, not just in my photography life, but generally. It really has been very fulfilling. And I've made so many great friends with just the most amazing people. So I reckon, when we can, I will be picking it up again and touch wood with the way things are. We've probably got, if we're going to be completely honest, maybe 5 years maximum of the project left, really, for our World War II veterans, if we're being, blunt about things. However, having seen the impact it's had on veterans and families, I won't be stopping. I will continue, because there are other veterans who are obviously going to be reaching certain ages. So we've got the Iraq War, we've got the, Falklands War, so on and so forth. So I think I will, there's no think about it. I will always do this kind of stuff for veterans, but then I've also got my other stuff as well. So, but yeah, I couldn't possibly stop now. I just couldn't.
Did you, this is one thing actually that really interests me when I looked at the series of photographs. Did you come up with the look first? Like, did you develop the look and then went, okay, and now I need to find veterans? Or was that just something that sort of organically happened?
No, it was, again, great question. It was more a case of, I knew what I wanted to create, that it was going to be something that I would call classic and timeless. And then I just kind of researched it with, I spent quite a bit of time on Google and Pinterest looking at photographs from the 30s and the 40s, looking at work of like Annie Leibovitz, Yusuf Karsh, and then just kind of playing around with it and almost reverse engineering some of their pictures to see what I could come up with. It's a one light setup. So, you aim for that kind of Rembrandt setup. That's a given. So the style of it has got to come from elsewhere as well, hasn't it? It's got to come from how they appear on camera, relaxed and comfortable, and then the post-processing. So it was definitely something that I kind of worked on before really embarking on photographing the veterans, but it was done with the intention of then using it on those pictures. So there was a uniformity across the whole series.
I love that, that kind of, looking at a photograph and then trying to work out how it was done, that kind of taking it apart. I love doing that. I do all the time. I do it consciously when I look at somebody's style, like looking at your veteran series. I'm immediately thinking, okay, what modifier was that? What was the angle of the lights? Like, where, is there one light or multiple lights set up? And I do it unconsciously as well, or subconsciously, not unconsciously.
I know what you meant. What you meant.
So I do it subconsciously. Funny story. There's my daughter. She's 9 now, but from when she was probably about 5 or 6, I remember we were at a train station in Germany, and I was looking at a movie poster. And it was something like a Marvel superhero movie or something, and it was an ensemble cast. So there was like a number of different superheroes, or the actors in their costumes on the poster, and I was looking at it, and you could tell that it was a composite, because if you looked at their eyes, you could tell they were all different modifiers, and they were all shot in different studios under different lighting conditions. And you kind of go, aha, that's a soft box. That was not the box. That's the beauty dish. They were obviously in different places. And so I taught her how to identify the modifier in the eye light, basically.
Yeah.
It's such a funny thing. So now every time we're out somewhere and she sees a picture or photo or poster or something, she goes like, "Oh, I think this was softbox."
Oh, you've created a monster there.
I know. It's a funny thing, but I love taking things apart. So you were talking about some of the people that you analyzed, like Annie Leibovitz, for example. Is that what you would describe as your general kind of portrait influence?
Yeah, I definitely would. Mark Seliger, Leibovitz, Yusuf Karsh, Joey Lawrence, people like that for definite. And I've always looked at their work. I remember years ago when you kind of like start out, people say, "Oh no, you shouldn't really look at other people's works. It causes you to kind of compare yourself." I've never done that. I've never compared. I have always tried to copy. And I'm going back a few years. If I ever said that to people, there'd be like a sharp intake of breath, and people saying, "Oh, you can't do that. You've got to be an individual." You know what I mean? Yeah, but my kind of thoughts are, how do you get a style? If you don't have a starting point, how do you develop a style? So I've always said, look, get out there, photograph, in a way that you think Leibovitz did. Try to copy that picture, because you never will, because we're all different. There'll always be something that you do is different without even being conscious that you're doing it different. Your mind will just make you do it different because that's what it prefers. And then from that, your style comes out. And
very often there are a lot of happy accidents along the way that will sort of aid to developing your own style. Because with the advent of YouTube, of course, now we have the opportunity to see behind the scenes videos. And how often have I seen like a behind the scenes thing and thinking, that's how they do it?
Yeah.
I thought they did it a completely different way. Yeah, it's like, what? You know?
Yeah, you're right.
And it's not too dissimilar from music. Like Nick and myself being musicians, as you develop as a musician, it's a similar thing. You copy other people. Clearly, that's what you do on the guitar. You learn how to play, I don't know, Eddie Van Halen songs, and you learn how to play, you know, Steve Vai stuff, whatever. And then 15 years down the line, you've taken all of these ingredients and you cooked up your own broth, and that's what is you in the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and so coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning, this opportunity to go out during this pandemic and do things differently, it's really just a really great opportunity. Just go and grab these additional, you know, ingredients and just heat up your own photography in that way.
Yeah. Do something. Yeah.
Exactly. So how did you get started in photography in the first place?
It kind of progressed really from doing I started out as the retoucher kind of thing. So I was working with Photoshop, and then long story short, I got kind of fed up of people thinking there was a make it look brilliant filter in Photoshop, which we know there isn't. So got a camera and kind of went from there really. I wanted to see it from concept to print, you know, if you like. And also it was a case of wanting a bit of longevity within the industry, because I thought that if I was only the guy, I was only ever really known as the Photoshop guy. And I kind of saw that as having a bit of a shelf life because software develops, and for the mass market, it makes the ability to do things a lot easier. So is there the need for the people who do all that retouching? I mean, of course there is at the moment, but who knows what's happening in the future? Whereas the actual capturing of the image, I saw there being longevity in that, and I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to see it all the way through from start to finish. When I think of some of the images I used to work on that I'd get sent over, I mean, I remember on one of the jobs I had for the front of the Radio Times front cover, I had to make Alan Sugar look a year older because he wasn't available for the photo shoot for the next series of The Apprentice. So I had to kind of make the lines a bit deeper and grey the hair a little bit more and all that kind of, and even draw a table that he was sat at, so it was a different table.
I bet he loved being made to look older.
Yeah, I had to work on a picture of, there was a program called Most Haunted.
Right.
And a lady called Yvette Fielding, and she had the pictures I got sent over, she had this blonde wig on, and it was just dead straight hair on the shoulders. But for some strange reason, when they did the photo shoot, they allowed, I don't know who they allowed the tea lady to come in and cut her fringe. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just unbelievable. So the job I had to do, in Photoshop, the job I had to do was tidy her hair up.
Yeah.
It's like, there's got to be more to life than this. Yeah. So I start taking the pictures. Do you know what I mean? So that's how it kind of went from there.
So there's a great lot of Photoshop tutorials on your YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I used to. I mean, I've always liked sharing stuff like that. I think the more you share, it kind of, the knock-on of that is that it kind of it develops you as well. Do you know what I mean? Because you're always looking for new ways of doing stuff. But yeah, I did share. I shared quite a lot. Yeah, I just enjoyed doing it. Really, it's just quite a nice thing to do. I had a break from doing it for a while because YouTube started to feel like a job. So I took a break from it, and now I'm back on again doing these weekly videos about the landscape stuff, and there'll be more Photoshop stuff now. I'm in a different place now, mentally when it comes to how I feel about photography and retouching. So I'm happier to get back into posting stuff on there now.
You know, in a previous life, I used to do a lot of training and whatnot in the company that I worked for, and there truly is no better way to learn than to teach. There really is. And to this day, I stand by that, and I still feel the same. You know, even if you're amazing at what you do, there may be little aspects that you just do because that's how you do it, and you've always done it. And you may not remember the reasoning behind it or anything like that. And when you then teach it, you need to know all of that, and it forces you to recalibrate how you think about things. I love it. It's the best way.
I've just, like I mentioned at the start, literally last week I finished writing the latest book, and I've learned a lot doing that, because obviously when you're writing a book about, I mean, this one's on selections and stuff, you have to really dive deep into the menus to make sure that you cover everything. And on quite a few occasions when I'm writing it, I'm going into certain areas in Photoshop and going, what the hell does that do? I've never used that. And then clicking, oh, hello, I like that. So I've been learning stuff while I've been writing the book as well. So, which was good in some ways because it was more content, but bad in some ways because it meant I had to write more. So there you go.
You know, it is little things like that. I just, it sounds so silly, but I only really recently came across the mixer brush in Photoshop. And I thought, how have I not seen that before? Why have I not seen it? What an amazing tool.
That wasn't in my version. Definitely not. I would have noticed that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I learned how to use the history brush.
See, that I don't use that. Maybe I should.
I use that. I tell you what, the only thing I use that for currently is in retouching somebody's bags under the eyes. And I find it a really, really useful tool for that. But it's just, the whole idea of it had never crossed my mind beforehand because it was always like one of these tools that, well, I just don't use, and then therefore you don't, if it doesn't.
There's so much in there. The great thing about Photoshop is it kind of, you can use it in a way that suits your workflow. There's, you get people saying, oh, that's the wrong way of doing it. Well, actually, no, it's not. I still got the same result, didn't I?
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? It's like, when I left school, I used to be a plasterer. And, I used to work on the building sites in Wolverhampton. And when you're doing the plastering, my technique for plastering was you'd start at the bottom of the trowel and go up, down, up. Whereas the bloke I worked with started at the top and went down, up, down. We still got the same result. We just used the tools differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing because, of course, in Photoshop, there's about 5 different ways that you can do just about anything in there. And it always depends on so many different things. It depends on what your own workflow is and which order you like to do things in, and what just works for you. And once in a while, you come across a different way of doing things that might actually, shave off 5 minutes of your editing time. And you go, oh, I'm going to do it this way from now on because actually there's an advantage in it for me.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, somebody retouching like an architectural shot or something, that's going to be very different from retouching, a headshot, for example. So, it's such a flexible software.
Definitely, yeah. Loved it.
And I'd say we, at some point early on in the pandemic, we set up like a Zoom group on a Tuesday night where photographers would come together and we would just chat about creative things and some ideas as to what we could do around the house, or how we could just keep the creative juices flowing. And that then developed into almost like a Photoshop tutorial group every Tuesday night, where I would pick anything in Photoshop and teach people how to do a particular technique or something like that. And it's just like you mentioned earlier, it was really just a matter of like having to really deep dive into this. Although it was just a 2-hour sort of tutorial kind of a thing. Yeah, it was like, okay, I have to really look at all of these new features, that Photoshop have brought out.
What a great idea for a group. I wish I'd have thought of doing something like that with like the email group where you say, right, I tell you what, on this night we're going to meet up. If anybody's got anything they want to share on how to do that, let's share your screens. And that's a really good thing to do.
Yeah, we started this because about maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks into the first lockdown, I saw a lot of comments of like friends on Facebook, and I got a lot of messages, and whenever I spoke to people, was the vibe was always the same. It's like, man, I've been sitting around for 6 weeks. My camera's been in the bag. I haven't taken it out once because I can't go out and shoot animals or wildlife or landscapes as I would normally do.
Yeah.
And and when you hear that from one person, it's like okay, but when you start hearing it from multiple people, and everybody seems to be sitting around at home watching Netflix all day, kind of thinking, being frustrated with the fact that they seemingly, can't do the things that they're used to. You can think, okay, well, maybe we should just all talk about it because it looks like we're all in the same boat here, Yeah. And that really, I mean, initially it was just like a bunch of people getting together on Zoom, talking about it. And what became very apparent very quickly was that somebody would have some idea and everybody else went, oh, that's a really good idea. Let's try that. Was, I remember one person on the call once mentioned that, oh, I've just found light pockets in my house and I photographed those. And I'm thinking that's a really good idea. Everybody's got windows. Everybody knows, like you always know, like in your house when the sun is at a certain place at a certain time, you always think like, oh, that's really cool light coming through this window, and it always looks cool, like because it's a south facing window, or whatever. But I've never thought, oh, maybe I place something in that light, and when that happens, I photograph it because that might actually make a good picture. And again, it's something, it's something to do. And then this group just developed into like, I don't know, photography Q&A type of a thing, and eventually it sort of morphed into a Photoshop.
The Zoom thing has been a real blessing, hasn't it, over this last year? I mean, you guys utilising Zoom there, camera clubs utilising it. It's and families getting to see each other. I think that there's so much. I was talking to somebody about this last night. There's been so many positives come out of it. Yeah, there's a lot of negatives. If we really put our grumpy head on, we can think a load of negatives. But the positives, I mean, there's technophobes out there who've embraced this video conferencing now to be able to short chat, and going forward, when this is all behind us, they're going to continue doing that. So that alone is a great thing. There's people using technology they wouldn't have done,
Absolutely. And you mentioned camera clubs. I'm a member of a local camera club. And I remember vividly at the very beginning of lockdown, it was like, all right, we're going to have to stop our meetings. We won't be able to meet. Who knows when we're getting back? And I remember saying, we're going back next Thursday. That's what we're going to do. If we're going to do on Zoom. And it was like, oh yeah, but you have to have a subscription. So I have a subscription. I'm going to run it. Like, 7:30 on Thursday, see you all there. Here's the link. And that's how we started. That's how we started. And of course, as an end result now, the opportunity in there was that now all of a sudden you could have speakers, on in the meeting doing presentations from all over the world. We had speakers from Ireland and I think from Canada and from Scotland, and that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And so I
opened up my calendar to do camera club meetings because I'd stopped doing them. Because of the travel and stuff like that. But I opened them up pretty early on, and I did a presentations for, I think, about 80 last year camera clubs, because it was easy doing it from home. Only once did I get the time zone wrong, and I presented to America. I had to do it at 3 a.m.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. So
how did that go down?
Well, they were fine. I was, I don't know how I appeared, maybe a little bit dreary, but I made sure from then on, check the time zone changer in Calendly.
Yeah. Well, see, we have that sometimes because we have international guests on this show. And of course, then, it's the time zone thing. So what usually happens is it's usually evening for us when it is like sort of morning for them.
Yeah.
And for me, being stuck in a house with 3 kids, and my wife and everything, it always means like, okay, guys, the living room is out of bounds. You're gonna have to find something else to do for a couple of hours because we're recording. But it's just, it's just how it is. But yeah, well, I think there are elements of that I think will be useful even when things go back. Because the idea of having speakers being able to present from all over the world that's really that's a great asset.
Oh, absolutely. Does it it completely changes what's possible now, doesn't it? Whereas looking for somebody within the same country to drive a couple of hours or whatever now, do they really need to? I mean, it's always lovely to do stuff in person. You can't beat that. But Zoom is, it's a pretty good alternative. It really is.
So have you had time to think of any other sort of personal projects along the lines of the veteran?
I mean, like I said, the veteran one's always going to go on. I will continue doing this landscape one because that's great. That's a personal development thing for me. But now that we're in Devon, there is a new venture which I'll be starting, and it's all the design work's been done for it. The websites are all ready, and it's called Totally Devon. So I'm going to be touring the whole county for the next couple of years, photographing. The kind of catchphrase for it is the people, the places, and the produce that makes Devon Devon.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to involve taking portraits of, the people who, the farmers, the fishmongers, the fishermen, the cheesemakers, the cider makers, photographing the actual produce as well, and then also going out and photographing the landscape. So, and my goal is that in about 18 months, 2 years' time, there'll be exhibitions across Devon to showcase it all. But there'll also be a website where select suppliers and whatever from across the county can advertise through the site as well. So it's going to be like a Devon hub is what I want to create for it. But get it kind of known out there first because of the photography side of things and also the video side of things, because there'll be quite a lot of video on it as well. So because there's no point trying to build something without anybody knowing who the hell you are anyway. I might as well spend the next year and a half, 2 years getting out into the county to show people, right, this is what I do, and then go from there.
What a great idea. What sparked that interest in the first place to start that project?
I wish I could tell you. It just came to me. It just came to my head that I want to do that. I want to go and photograph the people, the places, and the produce. And then once my head got into it, I then came up with the idea of what it would include, how I could then do the website. And I don't know. I think I'm always looking for the next thing, Nick. Do you know what I mean? And where the next thing doesn't mean that the other things stop. It just means it's an addition to it. And it quite excites me. It's another excuse to get out there rather than photographing solely, the veterans for a veterans project. This is going to mean me photographing anybody and everybody that makes Devon. And there's some real characters. That's what I love about this county. There's some proper characters. The sort of Devonian, just wonderful people. And like I said at the start, I don't photograph models. I want to photograph characters, and this is a great way to do it.
Love it. And if you think, down the line, that could do wonders for Devon in itself, right? And for tourism, if you depending on where you want to take that whole project in the future, right? You could even expand it to other counties as well at some point.
Well, do you know what? I guess so. And I think I'd probably stick with Devon, but if there's other people who had their counties that they wanted to, then I'm in a position to be able to show them how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I would suggest you do, but I want to really, we've moved to Devon. We've always wanted to. I want to just absorb myself in Devon and be part of Devon. I mean, I've got BBC Devon want me to do a video for them next week. And that's just brilliant to show people how to get out there with your phone to do stuff. So I just want to get out and do as much within this county as I possibly can because, we've wanted it for years. I want to be really absorbed in it.
And for those viewers and listeners who are maybe not aware of where Devon is in the UK, if you're an international listener, Devon is one of these really beautiful counties in the south of England that's really full of what I would call almost as a foreigner myself, I would call it like this sort of archetypical English countryside.
Yeah,
type
it is.
Of county,
it's like going back in certain parts of Devon. It's like stepping back in time. It really is. It's unspoiled. It's just beautiful coast, beautiful greenery, and countryside, little villages, the quaint little villages and stuff. So yeah, it is. It's a special place. I love it. Yeah.
Yes, rolling hills, stone walls, and what did Bure Perry say? People take their Shetland ponies for a walk.
That's right. Yeah,
we get with somebody walking there past here. We do get that. Yeah, we do. Seriously, honestly, we do. Yeah.
Bure, if you are watching this episode, let me tell you, it actually does happen.
It does happen. Definitely does happen. Yeah.
Also, a lot of good ale around in Devon, I think.
There is. Yeah, there's a lot of good microbreweries around, local ones as well. So, yeah.
I ate, as I was saying just before we came on air, that I went down to Devon last year for a week with some friends, and I've remembered where it is, or rather my friends told me where it was. It was at Meeshaw.
Meeshaw. I have heard of Meeshaw.
Near South Molton.
Oh, South Molton's 15 minutes away. Yeah.
There. So I told you it would have been close.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And all I ate was cheese.
Good on you.
Week's worth of cheese. Amazing.
There you go.
And that's why you're running now, Nick. That is exactly the cheese.
Get rid of this. Yeah.
Brilliant. Meeshaw. I'm going to look that up now. It can only be down the road, so.
Yeah, it's literally just around the corner. And, I only saw that little bit. And as I was saying before we came in air, that actually I can't remember the last time I'd been down to that anywhere near that region. And my God, of all the counties in this country to live in, and of all the counties for you to be able to go out over the next couple of years and photograph and video, I'm slightly envious, I have to say. Amazing. Yeah, amazing
looking
place.
Forward to it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Devon and Somerset those are the two counties
Devon,
that
Somerset, Cornwall.
Cornwall, yeah.
Okay, when you're in this country, you can't say Somerset without saying it with an accent. You have to say Somerset.
Somerset. What's a Devon or Devonian accent? How does that work?
I'm not even going to attempt it because there could be a Devonian listening to this at some point who will just chastise me. So no. I'll send you a link. I'll send you a link to something.
Okay.
It's always tricky. I tell you what, when I first moved to the UK, I had a real problem with some of I had a real problem understanding some of the accents. I wasn't really aware. Just I think like many foreigners, I think quite naturally when you think of the UK, you think of London, and then you think of Miss Marple when it comes to the rest of it, and so I was never aware that there are so many different accents in all these different counties. That's a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
And it makes life super interesting, actually. I love people's accents. It's always one of these things. And I love looking at photography as well and trying to work out where in the country that was taken. When you see you see like a landscape shot, and I mean, not being much of a landscape photographer myself, by the way, but I do have an interest in landscape photography because I love looking at the images.
Yeah.
It's just, I think in the past, and I'm a little bit older now, so things are maybe a little bit different. But in the past, I always used to think I have no problem with staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning shooting a gig, but I really can't get myself to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to sit in the field, to look in a tree, to wait for the sun to be in a certain space to take one photo,
Yeah. I don't mind that. I'm a morning person, so I can deal with that. He says at the moment, when the summer comes and it gets brighter really early, it could be a different story, but I'll be a sunset photographer then.
Yeah. But has taking sort of landscape imagery throughout the pandemic, has that really allowed you to discover the Devon countryside as well at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it has in certain areas, but even though we can move around if it's for work purposes. Do you know what I mean? So being a lot of what I do is getting out there doing photos and creating content. I can go off and do stuff all over the place. However, entering into the spirit of the things, I've not wanted to do that because it can it can annoy people, and it's almost like showing off. Yeah. So I've kept very local. But even being very local, there's so much to discover. I mean, spending more time in the same place. Like there's one particular woodland I go to, and I go there quite a bit. Every time I go there, I see something different. And I did like an analogy yesterday. I did a little quick FaceTime live video, a Facebook live video yesterday when I was there, and I kind of described it as almost like peeling the layers of peeling the skin off of an onion. The first time you go there, you peel off, you see certain much. You peel up, you're there longer, you take another thing, and you see even more, and even more, and even more. So it's kind of like the spending time there. It's amazing how you start to notice more things. So and that's why we said at the start, you don't have to go for miles to get the great photos. It's amazing if you can just keep revisiting certain places in your local area, and it's amazing what you'll see each time you go back.
You'll see new things, and you'll see the things that you saw before, but in a slightly different way as well.
Exactly, because if the weather's different, the lighting's different, it can completely change what could potentially be quite a dull location. If you get the right lighting, it can change it dramatically. So,
Glyn, you also you sell sort of self tutorials and training courses as well, right? And if I remember correctly, you also sell one that's on your timeless look.
That's right.
And how you go about that as well. So can you tell us just a little bit about that course and how that came about and why you decided to sell that as a training course?
Because that was a look that became popular with the projects, and people asking a lot of times, how do you do it? How are you lighting it? What's the editing? How are you color grading it? I just decided to put a tutorial together because, I knew it would be popular, and it has proven popular. But so there's that side of it. But also, I can't be in every place. I can't be everywhere. So by people knowing how to do that particular thing that I'm doing with veterans, they can then, if they know a veteran, they can go and do it if they want to do it in a similar style, or at least start it in that style and then do their own little tweak to it. So, and it also, it kind of goes back to the fact that I like sharing stuff.
You know, I'll say it again. To the best way to learn and develop is to teach. Right, there's those 3 stages of you know, learning how to do something, putting it in practice yourself, and then that final stage of teaching someone else to really cement everything that you know about it. And that's you know, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about your latest book that you've just finished. Can you know tell us about the topic, or can you share much about what's in
definitely.
that book, and when can we expect to see it?
It's well, the book itself is called the Photoshop Layers and Selections Workshop. So selections is something that I've always had a strange fascination with, really. I've always liked the challenge of doing selections, and whenever I've done classes at functions either here in the UK or abroad or whatever, I've always been asked, could you do a session on doing selections? So I thought it was about time that I did a book on it. So the book itself, there's like a layers, but really that's kind of done in a way to make sure that you understand what we're then going to be doing in the selection side of it. So then the selections takes you through pretty much not everything, because there is, like we've said already, there's so much in Photoshop anyway, but I would say the vast majority of the kind of stuff you would need to know when it comes to making selections in Photoshop. But then as well as that, I've put in a few workarounds, because it's all well and good teaching people, this is a certain tool. You know, here's the magnetic lasso tool, here's the polygonal lasso tool, and here's select and mask, and here's select subject. You can teach them how to use those, and they will work brilliantly on the right image. But if you go to use it on an image where it doesn't work, what do you do then? Well, you need to know, I think, how to use the tools together and techniques together to end up with the result that you ultimately wanted. So what I've included in the book is a chapter on workflow, saying, right, here's an image, this is how I made the selection. So I started using this, then I had to do that, and then I did this. This is why I did it, and this is what it did, and so on and so forth. So to give people the idea of, right, having that mentality of what would happen if I did that. So, yeah, that's basically what the book is. I'm honestly, I am genuine. I'm not just saying this because it's my book. I want people to buy it. Of course I do, but I'd like to think I've built a reputation on trust, and I am genuinely happy with the content in the book. Very happy with it, especially the workflow section and the chapter on the pen tool, because I know the pen tool can be a real headache for people to get their head around. So I'm really pleased with how that's worked out. As for timing, Nick, as to when it'll come out, it's all been submitted. So now the team at Rocking Up kind of start doing their bit, doing the proofreading, sending back the edits for me to have a look at, and then the page layout. I think Amazon at the moment says June 29th, but I know that won't happen because it's just the way the book world is. So I think we're looking at August time for it to be available.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be in the US, and then it filters out across the rest of the world the following month.
I absolutely love that. You know, Kay, I don't know about you, but I certainly find selection one of the toughest things to do,
especially
to do it well in Photoshop. And I struggle time and time again, to the point where on occasion I'll just stop and I'll do something else with the photo instead of selecting and doing whatever I need to do, you know, and that's a shame. That's my lack of knowledge of what each of the tools can do. And like you say, how to use them in conjunction with others. So what a fantastic topic to do it on, because there's a billion topics you could have done it on.
The book before it was layer masks, brushes and blend modes, which are the 3 things I think you need to learn. That was in the book before, called the Toolbox. But this one, my only concern with this, and I actually emailed the publishers the other night, was to say, look, you know, if we have August, September time as a release date, October we'll have Adobe Max, which invariably means big launches from big updates from Adobe, of which I know there are a couple of things coming with selections. So my thoughts were, look, how do we keep this book up to date? And you can't really keep a book up to date now with the way that software is updated so frequently. So what we're going to be doing is, when there are updates, I'll be writing additional sections which people who've got the book can download from Rocking Up, so that it's going to be kept up to date that particular way. So,
especially when it comes to selecting hair and fur. Adobe's come on leaps and bounds over the last 5 years or something. You know, especially in the most recent update. I remember there's the hair selection, like the automated hair selection, has gotten so much better. that really does help me as a headshot photographer all the time, especially when we're talking about like corporate headshots where you got to change out the background, for example, and change the color of the background and stuff like that. So that's going to be extremely useful. And I know this is like one of the hardest kind of tasks for anybody to get into is selecting things like hair.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, you've definitely got someone here who's going to buy it. I assure you.
Hey.
That'll go. Honestly, it'll do me wonders. Something I did want to ask, Glyn, is why did you decide to do something like that in the form of a book as opposed to a video tutorial or explanation or set of videos, I should say, more than anything else? What swayed you to go more towards the book route?
Well, I've done some classes recently. I did the Kelby One conference and the Photoshop Summit. I did video classes on selections, and they proved really popular. So that's what made me think, right, maybe do a book on this. So the book will be coming out, but then around about the time as well, there will be some video content put out as well. Okay. So people have got the choice between both, because, you know, there are people who prefer the written word, there are people who prefer video, there are people who like both. So the idea is it's kind of like, hopefully it'll catch all there.
Yeah. People learn differently. I think that's an important thing to bear in mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. And I find I learn differently depending on what it is I want to learn as well. If I just want a quick tip, oh God, how do you do that again? How do you do that? How do you do it? Video tutorial style is perfect for me. It works really well. However, if I want to learn an entire topic, let's say, I find reading it in a book form, I learn better that way.
It also depends what mindset I'm in, the way I want to learn something. You know, like, because I'm learning more and more and more about Premiere Pro and After Effects, and I'm loving it. And I'll go on to Skillshare and places like that to learn that. But I've also got books on Premiere because sometimes I just want to sit on the sofa and have a read. Yeah. So it's catch all, really.
Yeah. Let me just say at this point, Skillshare, if you are interested in sponsoring this video, then go right ahead. But actually, Glyn, one question that's always interested me when it comes to books of that nature is, how long does it take? Like, how long does the process take from the initial, kind of inception to when it's on the shelf?
Right. If Rocky Nook are listening to this, it takes months.
Right.
It takes a lot of writing, planning, and doing a little bit every day. However, the reality is most of the author friends I've got as well are the same. It's always down to the wire. So I would say, although I knew what content was going to be in the book because I'd planned it all and drawn it all out and I knew exactly what was going to be in there, the actual writing of the book took me 10 days.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'd literally just committed myself. Nothing else was going to be done for 10 days. This is what I meant at the start about me being on a lockdown. That's it. Everything else is going to have to wait. I am now completely writing the book from morning till night. And that's what I did. And I think I did that with Toolbox as well. I seem to work well when there's a bit of pressure, and I knew that I had to get it done. And it kind of just went from there, really. But
How does it normally work? I mean, it's an interesting topic, I think, because not many people really get an insight into like the world of book creation generally. Is it that the publisher gives you a deadline and basically says like, okay, by the 28th of March or something, you have to deliver?
It varies from publishing house to publishing house. I mean, when I did a book for Peach Pit Press, they work differently in by where they would say, right, every time you submitted a chapter, then you kind of like would get a payment, or if you like, an advance payment. And that was an incentive then to be able to say, right, I'll get a chapter done this week, so that's another payment coming in, and so on and so forth. Whereas with Rocky Nook, it's a case of, right, if you want the book to be out by that time of year, that means the draft needs to be in at the very latest by this time. And there is a considerable time that they give you. But I mean, Rocky Nook are a lovely company to write for. I know them really, really well. Scott and Ted, who are like heads, they're good friends. And as long as they know that you aren't taking the mick, and you are working hard on it, they will give you an extension to an extent. But really, you don't want to have an extension because you want your book to be out there. So, you get the deadlines, and it's good to have a deadline because you've got to have a date to work to. Otherwise, it'll never happen.
Yeah.
Once you've done that draft, Glyn, I've always been quite interested, because if you think about novels and things like that, they have editors that will then go through it and help the author with the final kind of version. But when you've got a book that's technical, and in that side, they may well not have anyone that's versed in Photoshop at all, for example. How does that editing process work, or does it not really happen?
It doesn't really happen. Rocking Up themselves they specialize in educational books. So when you're going to write a book, you have all the kind of like the meetings that you ordinarily would do, and you get assigned a team of people. There's about 6 people assigned to you, which are then involved in the creation of your book. And you get an editor. Now, my editor's Jocelyn. She's amazing. So I would submit stuff to her, and her way of editing it and proofreading it is she knows her way around Photoshop, but she would put on her beginner's head, and she'd have all the images, and she'd have what I've written, and she will follow it, everything throughout the whole book, step by step by step. And if she encounters somewhere along the line, oh, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Oh, Glyn, that step there, I think you meant to say this. You might want to change that. So the fact that you have somebody who literally goes from cover to cover, going through everything that you've done, is a real safety net. Sometimes things do slip through that net.
Sure.
And there are some things that get missed, but in the second print, that's when those things are changed and what have you.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic process. You send it all in, then Jocelyn or whoever your editor is will then start doing the stuff, sending it back to you with certain edits, with Mark saying, what does that mean? Change this, you've missed an image there, so on and so forth. You then send that back, and then it goes to the page layout and the design team, and then you get drafts back. It's fantastic. Really, once you've sent it in, it gets really exciting because you start to see it all coming together.
Is it easy sometimes to kind of lose track when, let's say, if you're aiming a book at relative beginners, for example, but of course you're coming at it from sort of an expert position. Is it easy sometimes to lose track of who the end audience or the final audience is, and get too far ahead?
In some ways, Kirsten, it could do. But I think because I've done quite a lot of teaching, you do know where to pitch it, and I've kind of learned not to take for granted what I know. Do you know what I mean? Because what I might think is a basic, well, surely people know that. I don't need to say that. Anyway, carry on. I've learned that you can't take for granted that you know how to open an image. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know a very good friend of mine, Jesus Ramirez, when he runs the Photoshop training channel, when he first taught at Adobe Max, his first ever class, he got a little bit of a bad rating because some people complained that it wasn't pitched at them. And he's like, but it was really quite simple. But when looking at some of their feedback is, he had an image open in Photoshop. He didn't tell us how to open an image. Wow. Okay, so we've got to pitch it like that. So it's very difficult to sort of pitch it for everybody. So you've got to try and find a middle ground. And maybe right at the start of the book, you go to open an image, go File, Open. So then you say, right, we've done that now. For the rest of the book, you remember, right? File, Open. So I don't have to keep repeating that. So it's that kind of a process.
So this is your 4th book, is that correct?
Yeah.
And there's another book that we sort of mentioned a little bit earlier on, Photograph Like a Thief, that I loved the title of. What was the sort of inspiration for that book?
Wanting to show people how to develop a style, because that's what the whole idea of the book was. The copying thing, find out certain images, teaching people how to reverse engineer the lighting to say, well, I think they could have done this, and then try to recreate your own version of it. And by copying again and again and again, that's where, having done it a lot, that's when your own style starts to come out. But the best way, you mentioned it earlier on, the best way of learning lighting is to reverse engineer it. So
have you got any plans for future book releases?
Yeah, I have actually. All kinds of ideas, but I'm also going to be doing some smaller PDF, ebook download type of things on the website as well, sort of bite-sized little books, create like a little series of a few things as well. So some of the classes that I've done on video formats, again, some people, like you said, Nick, what made you go for that book format over a video format? Well, there's some videos out there that need to be put into book format. So I'll be converting those and putting them onto the site as well. So people have got the choice between the two.
Now, you're also an instructor for Kelby One. How did that relationship come together?
long story short is that years ago, as I do now, I check out Scott Kelby's blog, and rather than just reading it, I would post a comment, I'd reply or give a thought about something. And that wasn't done with the intention of, I hope he sees me. It was genuinely me wanting to sort of, comment on stuff. Because if somebody's taken the time to write a blog post and compile one, I think, just add a little bit of a comment in there. And with that, I then, at that particular time, I was starting to, people were asking me to teach stuff. So I started to do a few workshops. Started to put some videos out there. And then completely out of the blue, true story, I was sat in Costa Coffee in a place called Tame in Buckinghamshire.
Know it well.
And I'm sat in there having a coffee the one day, and my mobile phone rings. I didn't recognise the number, but it was an American number. And I answered it, and I'm like, hello. And he goes, hi, is that Glyn? Yeah. Hi, Glyn, it's Scott Kelby. Hello, trying to be all calm and cool. Hello there. He says, Glyn, you coming to Photoshop World this year? I said, yeah, I'll be there. He said, oh, good. He said, can you do me a favour? I said, yeah. He said, will you teach for us? And I honestly, hand on heart, I did this. I went, hold on one second. I put the phone against my chest here, and in the middle of Costa's, which was busy, I went, ow. I really did. And then yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, he said, great stuff. I'll get my PA, Jean, to get all the details over to you. Thanks. Looking forward to seeing you. And that was it. And sitting that, just, whoa, I didn't expect that. So yeah, that's how it kind of started, really. So, but it was done in, again, my kind of thing has been never to approach a company saying, please, can I work with you? I've never wanted to do that. I've always wanted them to see you for the value that you have, to say, we'd like to work with you. So the fact that Scott did that was wonderful. It really was. And, I'm glad to say he's become a really good friend. So
imagine that.
Yeah.
Wow. No words.
I didn't get barred from Costa, thankfully, as well.
All the weird things that happen at Costa Coffee.
Yeah.
Wicked. So I've seen you've got a number of the expo things coming up over the next couple of months. I know you're part of the Can-Am Photo Expo.
Oh, there's I've got to get on the site here. There's a few things coming up. I know that there's the Can-Am Expo in the States. I'm part of that, which I'm really looking forward to, actually. I've got 3 classes I'm recording for that. There's obviously the photography show coming up this weekend, the Spring Fair. Got a class on that, which is an editing class.
Yes.
And there is something which hasn't been made public yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. There's a big conference coming to do with Lightroom.
Oh, great.
And I'm really looking forward to doing that, because I'm doing some sessions on printing and time lapses. So looking forward to that. Yeah. So again, the time lapse one is a good one, because it's just something creative to do if you can't think of anything else to do. Get out there, do a time lapse. It's a bit of fun. Put it into a video. But the printing side of things, I'm really quite looking forward to. Oh God, I almost said passionate then. I hate that word. I'm really looking forward to doing that. So teaching people how to do prints, make sure that what they want to print looks like what's on the screen. So.
Yeah, printing is one of these things where I always think it's one of the things that very often in this day and age, and I'm talking probably predominantly about maybe younger photographers, it's one of the things that's forgotten about a lot in this sort of digital age of photography. And I've been totally honest, it was only when I joined a camera club, maybe 3 years ago or something, that really came back to the forefront of my mind, because of course there are lots of print competitions. And I remember initially thinking, why are there print competitions? Like, what year is this? And then really falling in love with seeing photographs printed, and framed and everything else. Is that something you do a lot of, printing?
I do. I pretty much every image that I finish will get printed every single time. And somebody actually asked me that this morning on social media, what do you do with all the prints? A lot of them go into like an art folder. I've got like a big zip case thing that I'll put them in just to keep them. Some will go on the wall, but obviously not all. But the value of a print is not just a case of, I really like that. It's lovely printed, that is. It will help you to grow as a photographer, and it will also help you editing as well, because I know I was chatting to Katrine Eisman. I don't know if you know Katrine. She's just amazing. And she said to me, she's a very wise woman, Katrine. She said, the truth you see the truth when you print the image. Because a screen can kind of hide things because of the different contrast levels and brightness levels and all that kind of stuff. Once it's printed, that's when you see the truth. Any kind of defects, any issues, you will see them in a print. So having that helps you to improve. But I'm a massive advocate of printing. I love it. It's nothing better. Who wants to spend all that money on kit and time learning for somebody to just look through a digital device and go, that's nice, that's nice, that's nice. Look at the reaction. I mean, I can see, you got prints on the walls behind both of you there. When you have a print and you give it to somebody, what do they do with it? They don't just go, oh, that's nice, and put it down. They walk around with it. They put it in different light. They bring it closer, further away. It's much more tactile. The response is how it should be. You know what I mean? It's an art, isn't it? And they're holding a piece of art in their hand rather than just flicking past it in the screen.
Absolutely. Even if you take it to its most basic level, I remember as a kid, I used to look through family photo albums. I used to sit there and look through them every so often and flick 10 of them or whatever there was. I can't remember last time I flicked through my photos in my Photos app and whatnot.
Well, I think isn't it great when you do though? If you dug out the photo albums now and sat on the floor in the front room and had them all out, it's a great evening. It's a really good evening looking through stuff.
I've thought this many times. It's how the few images that I've printed, because I don't print at home, and so I use a lab in town to do all my printing for me. And every time I get a print back, it just adds another dimension and another meaning to that image, and I've found that digital images are great and everything, but they just turn into one out of literally tens of thousands of photos on my photo app or in my Lightroom catalog. And printing something it's like the final process, the final part of creating an image. This is what I've learned, and I'm really a child of the digital photography age. And I really had to kind of not regress, but I really had to turn around and take a step back and reevaluate, really in order to really appreciate prints again. There's something that really fascinates me, and this might be something that happens in Devon a lot. But every time I go to an English pub and you see these photographs on the wall, this is for some reason I seem to find them in British pub or in English pubs all the time. Of the high street back in 1895.
The bygone era.
Yeah, the bygone era thing. I find that so fascinating.
Yeah, I love all that stuff.
Especially in local pubs, for example, you think is that Rickmansworth High Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're trying to work out that building is now a co-op. And, back then it used to be, a greengrocers or whatever it used to be back then. Yeah. I just find it's the most fascinating experience. And if it wasn't for prints, if that was all digital,
the value of a print is immense. It really is. It's way more than just having something in your hand. It does something. It helps you to grow for definite, and it's a completely different reaction when you give it to somebody. So it's a win-win. It really is.
And as a photographer, it's such a skill as well to be able to print things well. That is also something I personally have learned very much. Is that was really a skill set I did not have. When I first joined the local camera club, and I'm looking at some of those prints, I'm thinking, this is really hard. So I guess you would encourage younger photographers to get into printing and to keep printing their work.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of an investment. I always say that I prefer to do it myself, so you see it all the way through and you learn more doing it that way. But if you use a lab, that's still good. You know what I mean? Just make sure, whatever you do and however you do it, just make sure you do prints. So,
do you use a lab or do you do it yourself?
Up to certain sizes, I do it all myself. So at the moment, I do up to A3 plus on the one you can see on my shoulder. I am going to be getting a bigger printer, so that'll go to A2, something like that. But then for those occasions where I need something big, like we had at the exhibition at the end of 19 into 20, then I'll use a lab. And there is a certain lab that I've really, good relationship with. They know how my images look. The guy there is just unbelievable. So it's not a case of me just uploading it to a faceless company. I know these people and they kind of know what I like. So And that's important. Develop a relationship with the printer, like develop a relationship with the framers. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. I think that sort of thing is really, really important. It's all about the whole, to working together with people to get the best finished project you can. I mean, when I was given those, or when I do give the pictures to the veterans, they're not just given a floppy print. They're given an amount. Now, that only came about because I've become very good friends with the framer, Robin, who now will give me mounts. I'll pay him for them, but they're not expensive by any means. But he taught me how to do the mounting properly so that I can present it properly. All those little things there that you can all share and help each other out with. It's really valuable. You don't build your business from behind the screen. You've still got to get out there and build relationships with other craftsmen, if you like.
Absolutely. Sort of as an aside to that, to a certain extent, as you mentioned in sort of building relationships and building your business, when you sort of transitioned from being a retoucher to taking photographs and portraits, how did that work for you? And what I mean by that is, how did you go about finding that business for you? How did you find about finding clients for your portrait business? How did that work for you in the early days?
Well, one thing I've never done is I've never done advertising. I've never paid for any kind of advertising. So what I kind of did was I used my own outlet as my advertising. So I would do what I was always told you should never do: loads of work for free. But if I didn't do something for free, I had nothing in the portfolio. So I had to do free work to be able to photograph the kind of stuff that I wanted to get paid to photograph. So I would do loads of free stuff to build up the portfolio, and a lot of stuff came from that. A lot of stuff came from word of mouth and people recommending and stuff. But I also kind of just I used to go to breakfast meetings. Every town will have breakfast clubs where local companies can meet on one day in the morning at 7:00 in a local hotel or whatever. You have a bit of a breakfast and you get to know who's who. What do you do? Oh, I do this. Oh, that's interesting. Well, right, I need one of them. So that's a great way of networking, because one thing that the trouble nowadays, I think, with people is with social media, they rely on that too much, and they seem to think, I'm generalizing, but a lot of people can sometimes think that you don't have to have that face-to-face contact. And a lot of people are kind of wanting to conquer the world before their neighbor even knows what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? How many neighbors know what you do? If you went 2 houses down in your street and said, "What do I do for a living?" I don't know. So how can you expect to conquer the world if your neighbours don't even know what you do? And the only way they're going to do that is by going out and having these little meetings. Or, one thing I never did, but I would do if I was starting again now, I'd have my local village hall, which you could hire out for the day for about £20, stupidly low price. I'd have a local exhibition with tea and coffee and cake, and just send out flyers and let the local paper know that I'm having an exhibition. Great way of getting people to know who you are and what you do.
Wow. When you say it like the way you've just described all of that, it sounds so simple. And in reality, it is simple. The idea behind it is very, very straightforward. But I think when you're starting out your life as a photographer and growing your business, it doesn't seem so simple, and no. I think you've just explained it in such a way that I hope that comes across to people who are starting their business, that it is all about your local area to begin with.
It is, totally, yeah.
Man.
But and also working for free. Well, working for free, I don't care what anybody says, "Oh, you're ruining the business." And no, you're not.
No.
I mean, you're not going to do it forever. You're going to do it to the stage. It's going to be a back-scratching exercise. I ultimately want to photograph, I don't know, sports cars. Who do I know? Does anybody else know who's got a sports car? Right, can I come and photograph it? So they're doing you a favour by letting you photograph their beautiful Aston Martin. Yeah. And as a thank you, you give them a print. Yeah. You do enough of that, you build a portfolio. And then there comes a time when you go, draw the line now. I've got a great portfolio here. I now want to approach car companies or showrooms or whatever, or people in the local area who have got a bit of money and they have these vintage vehicles. I'd like to be able to photograph them. So I'll have an exhibition locally. They'll see it and go, "Here, would you photograph my Morgan for me?" Who knows where it goes? But unless, you've got to have a starting point, like I said, with the style. But if you don't have a portfolio to show what you want to photograph.
Well, I think that's the most important thing. You absolutely bang on the money there. The portfolio is really what matters ultimately, because in the arts in general, nobody really ever asks you for any qualification. It's not like, do you have a degree in photography or a diploma or whatever? It's like, show me what you can do. And then based on that, as a potential client, I decide whether I like this or I don't. And so you have to create a portfolio first. There's an interesting thing in the headshot world. I was think that when people start out in headshots, you gotta have some headshots to show. So you gotta get like your family, your friends, your dog, whoever in front of the lens to do it.
Yeah.
And again, this is one piece of advice I was given in the beginning. It's like somebody said to me, like, right, when you get to the point where you photograph your friends, like, don't photograph your friends, like photograph the kind of friends who are in the kind of professions that you want to get into. So if you have like people who are, in the business world, get them, take their portrait, because they don't, there's a higher chance of them recommending them to their colleagues and friends and people seeing that, so that you kind of get an inroad into that industry. And I found that very, very useful, because that's exactly how I built my my headshot portfolio to start with.
Having the project can help you develop your portfolio.
Yeah.
I knew a guy that, going back a few years now, he was doing a project to help him get portraits. He had a project called Who's at the Door. So he would have, in his house, just in one of the reception rooms, he always had a backdrop and a light set up. So whoever came to the door, DPD, milkman, you name it, whatever, come here for a second.
Awesome.
They take their portrait. What a great project. Yeah, there's a guy I know called Ian who you could just see he was going, I met up with him because he wanted to sort of, how can I build my business? And I don't know all the answers, but I'll just share my ideas with him. So I sat down with him over a coffee, and that was in a place called Banbury. And we're sitting down having a coffee in Costa, and he was sort of saying, look, I want to photograph characters and stuff. What can I do? And then he starts to tell me about, he likes to go down the allotment, and he does his veg. I said, why don't you do a project down at the allotment? I mean, think of the people down there. You could have some fantastic on location pictures of people on the allotment, stood by a shed with a shovel and veg over there. All that. I said, just do that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if he's done it, but I kind of thought, well, Christ, I'd do that. That'd be a good project. Oh. So, do projects, you get really excited, you enjoy it, build your portfolio. And just because you've got pictures of, I'm using the allotment as an example, you've got a great portfolio of people in that kind of style, doesn't mean to say you're only going to be asked to photograph people down an allotment. It means people can see now what you're capable of. I mean, my veterans project, work has come from that I never expected, because now, and this is a thing as well, people before, and if I go off on a tangent, just tell me, but whereas before people would say to me, what do? You say, I'm a photographer. What kind of pictures do you take? Portraits. What kind of portraits do you take? It was like a workflow that you're always asked the same questions. Whereas when you've got a project, like, for example, the veterans one, I can't remember the last time I was ever asked, what do you do? It's a case of, oh, you're the guy doing that thing with the veteran. Oh, yeah, I've seen that. And from that, people know what you're capable of, so you get hired, if that's what you want. Do you know what I mean? It's a project can define you. It doesn't pigeonhole you, but it defines you and what you're capable of.
With the veterans project, when you once you started shooting that, how did you then put that into the public domain? Like, how did you get people to know about that project initially?
Social media, posting them and having the website, and it's because there was a lot of veterans involved and a lot of their families, and you don't know who knows who and who does what. And next thing you know, there was the media were involved, because one of the families had contacted the media to say, oh, my dad, who you want to have on the program, he's also been photographed by this guy. Next thing you know, the BBC contacts you, and it just snowballs. If you don't put it out there, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you put it out there, some of it's going to stick. Do you know what I mean? But the thing with the project was, that was never my intention. I didn't approach the project thinking, if I do this could be really good for me. That was never the mindset. The mindset was solely, what can I do for them, the veterans? And you always hear the saying that if you give, you will receive. But you shouldn't give expecting to receive. It will come back to you, so long as your mindset is that you're giving. Does that come across? I don't know if that makes sense, but your intentions have got to be honourable. They've got to be the right intentions, because karma will come back. It will know that if you're doing this, if you're telling people you're doing this for the right reason, karma ain't stupid. It ain't going to give it back to you. But if you're out there doing it for the right reasons, and you continue doing it, it will come back at some point.
My God, I couldn't agree with that anymore. And that's when I was younger, in my early 20s, that wasn't really my mindset at that moment. And it was only I was learning more about audio engineering at the time, and trying to improve my skills there. And actually, there was a couple of guys called Graham Cochran and Joe Gilder, who teach all of that, and they said exactly what you just described right there. And suddenly it just clicked, and it totally changed my life with the way I approach things, and thought, absolutely right. And all I ever do now, and has ever done, is just help. If I can help, great. If I can give, I'll give, and never expect anything in return, ever. Invariably, exactly like you just said, it eventually, it does, not all of them will come back, but in other ways they start coming back to you, and it's a circle.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
If you take anything away from this podcast, that one right there.
Yeah.
There you go.
But it goes to emphasize also, again, the importance of personal projects.
Yeah,
massively. Yeah,
and I think,
massively important.
You've mentioned it. We've had in previous episodes, we've had guests talk about the importance of personal projects and getting involved in that, and and ultimately, it will help you grow as a photographer and as an artist, but it will also put your work out into the world, and it will eventually come back round, like these things do usually.
It is the best way of getting known that I can possibly think of. Doing a project, you just work on it, you'll get known for it, and that then will tell people what you're capable of, and away you go. No more having to explain, no more having to barter. That's what they know you can do.
So, Glyn, thank you very much for being a special guest on this episode. We have come to the end of episode 46. Of course, if you have been listening to this episode on audio, please don't forget that you can head over to youtube.com/camerashake, where you can see our faces in full and glorious Technicolor. Also, show us some love, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, click a like, all of the things that YouTubers usually say you should do. That would be fantastic. But that being said, without further ado, we will see you again next week. Have a great time, and we'll be back with episode 47.